All right, everybody, we are live for our next episode of the Safely Extreme Cast, where we discuss game design and game dev topics each week. I'm, of course, Josh Placer, and as always, my co-host from Nexus Games, Sharky. How are you doing?
I was doing really good until I found out this news for the topic today.
Mm-hmm.
We're
One last, end of the year, happy note, right?
yeah. Technically, this is remnants from 2018, but it's like this is like 2020 material right here.
Mm-hmm. Hey, Ryu. Yep, we have another very interesting topic we're going to be discussing. For those of you watching this, we're going to be talking about the CVAA law and what it means for video games to require to have accessibility settings. What that means and what you have to understand as a developer when it comes to accessibility and what separates it from approachability. That's been a topic we've discussed here in the past.
Yeah,
But
and one thing we need to clarify before we even get started is that we're not lawyers. We
mhm.
this is technically for entertainment purposes, but basically we're going to inform you as best we can. I put on my stream, I put links down to three resources for that, gives you more detail about this law and whatnot. I'm unsure if Josh put that down in his description or not,
Not yet. Let's see. But I
but
will update as you're talking.
yeah. But the this is a law that affects even indie developers.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the worst thing about this law is it's a subjective law. So
Which is
like,
always fun.
yeah, so there's no hard rules. It's no like if you do this, you're safe. If you do this and this, you're safe. If you're an indie this small, you're safe, kind of thing. If you're, none of that. It's if you can be screwed in many different ways without even knowing what's even going
Mm-hmm.
on.
Which fits with kind of a lot of the talks we've had, where you can ruin your game without knowing why you ruined your game.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. It's going. Hopefully, we'll get people to watch this live. Again, we are. For those of you watching this record right now, this is the Sunday before Christmas, and I think everybody is getting into holiday mode. Do you know what holidays are, Shark? We're supposed to take off for those.
Is that thing where you go to the water and annoy sharks?
I guess so.
Yeah, I hate those kind of times.
Yeah, it's going to be a very weird week, I guess, in terms of getting people to watch, video game related. So we canceled the roundtable, sadly, because holidays plus busy schedules makes it very hard to justify, wrangling in everybody for an hour and a half discussion.
Yeah, and I really hope a lot of people see this one because this is super important and applies to pretty much every game developer out there.
Hey, Mike. Let's see. Anything else going on before we get started with our main topic? Let's see. I did
Well,
post the cast we did with Mark about Nox Arcadis, which I think was a really great cast.
yeah,
Did you have a chance to see that one yet?
I think I've seen that one live,
Mm-hmm. Let's
and there's more CD Projekt Red news in there. They censored an entire game by
mm-hmm.
removing it from the store. There's
Yeah.
more bugs in Cyberpunk to where like no matter what you do, there's pretty much nobody that doesn't encounter several game breaking bugs kind of thing. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
like actually making Bethesda look good at this point with their
Yeah.
bugs.
And I have a post I'm writing about what the failure of Cyberpunk's really on really mean for AAA development. And maybe I'll post for the holidays. That'll be my little Christmas present for everyone.
But CD Projekt Red is indie according to a lot of people.
Oh yeah, they're an indie with how many people worked on that game? Like 400 people, 400 indie developers.
And not to mention their corporation that has to answer to boards and all this other
Mm.
stuff, and they're not in control of their own thing.
Do we have a board we have to answer to?
I mean, it's the masochism and shark board.
There we go. And yeah, as Shark was saying, yeah, so GOG was going to put up the game Devotion, which was taken off of Steam due to, I think they were doing something that pissed off China. They had like a picture of the Chinese leader or whoever like runs things.
No, there's a
And,
picture of Winnie the Pooh.
oh, and that was in reference, if I remember right. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's supposed to be something like that. And they were all set to go up on GOG, and then they decided to turn down the last minute. So I guess GOG and Blizzard are in the same place, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and definitely a very weird time for CD Projekt Red. I guess this is that case of, what's that meme about, hold my beer? Like Blizzard was going to be like the one causing all the trouble, and then CD Projekt Red decided to jump in.
Yeah. And it's really ironic after everybody talked about how consumer friendly they were and all this other stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
everything I brought up about it is like, there's this whole wise monetization thing that they said that we still have not seen what that is yet. And I'm expecting a big drama when that comes up because everything that's shaping up in here is looking like they shifted the design to GTA. So what if they shifted the monetization to GTA's online monetization too, but worse? I mean, that would be wise monetization indeed, and would very much follow everything they're doing so far. And I'm waiting for that to pop up because something's going to come out when their wise monetization is revealed.
Yeah. And I know Thorne was talking about how there's a rumor that developers are going to try and do the MMO model again because of all the flack about free to play and monetization like that. So that could
Yeah,
be something interesting.
Riot Games is getting into the MMO model.
Oh boy.
Yep. So we'll have a new China MMO.
I thought that's Valorant.
No, Valorant isn't that a first-person shooter thing? MMO like, isn't it like Overwatch or something?
Maybe. I know like Riot's been like trying to put out like they're really trying to push the whole League of Legends Riot Games brand. There's a Slay the Spire looking game coming from Riot, I think, next, or they're publishing it. A League of Legends story. One of these days, we do need to have a talk about branding and kind of lore when it comes to some of these games. Because I have a lot to say about Fortnite on this topic that bothers me. I think we need to, maybe we can call Jack in, because, Jack loves Fortnite.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Get Jack in on it.
And one of these days, I do need we need to get Tomo on for one of these shows too.
Yeah.
To Mojo's comment, I thought it was good. It seems like it's a game better for co-op than I think single players because of the fact you're having to manage 2 or 3 people at the same time.
That sounds harsh.
And I guess next week will have to be our end of the year wrap up show because, yep, it will be the last show of 2020.
Yep, it's hard to believe that 2020 is going away.
Or just becomes 2020 plus 1.
Yeah, it'll be 2020 the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
And today's
Mojo.
podcast is going to be very much that. But ironically, this stuff didn't happen in 2020. It happened in 2018, and nobody knew about it. Pretty much, as far as I know, the person who told me thought everybody knew, and everybody I've talked to had no idea what it even is, even now that they see it.
Which is always a great sign.
Yep, it seems like a thing that most AAAs would know, but any indie is probably not going to have a single clue, and it applies to indies.
Mm-hmm.
It applies to digital only games. It applies to physical games, it applies to every game. But
Mm-hmm.
depending on how much it applies, will depend on what your game is. If your game has any kind of chat system in it,
Mm-hmm.
aka multiplayer, this applies especially hard to you, like it does to me.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently, I'm going to have to register with the FCC before I even release my game.
Yep. And we'll talk more about that, I think, in the next minute or so.
Mm-hmm.
Before we do that, any more news other than that came out? Again, like CD Projekt Red will probably be in the news for some time with all the shenanigans. Oh, the big thing, of course, that it has been officially removed from the PSN store for the PlayStation 4 version, which that if that isn't a huge strike, I don't know what is.
Yeah, I think Microsoft did too. I think Microsoft
Let's
removed it.
see.
I know they're both offering refunds, and CD Projekt Red is offering a half-assed refund. They're
Hmm.
CD Projekt Red's refund is, yeah, you can refund it within the next week, kind of thing. But if you wait any longer than that, we're not offering refunds anymore. But at the same time, they're saying, hey, why don't you wait a month and let us get some updates in there before you refund the game? But we can't wait a month because you're not going to give us a refund after the next week.
Hmm. See,
So,
that's a catch-22 right there.
yeah. So jump on those refunds, and if they if they get those they get something workable in there by next month, then I can pretty much guarantee you, with all the bugs in there, there is no way they're going to get that remotely into any kind of shape in next month. Maybe
Mm.
next year, but next month, no, no, absolutely not. Because there is so many game breaking bugs in there that it's crazy.
Yep, and it's again, I think this is one of those things that I may have to put this in the post I'm writing as well. That people really latched on to CD Projekt Red over the last few years. I know
Hmm.
so many people became obsessed with them after The Witcher 2 and of course The Witcher 3.
And
But
of course, they all call them an indie studio.
uh-huh. But here's the truth. I remember them from The Witcher 1 and how horrible that game was when it was first released. I mean, it was bad. So bad I had to do a complete rebuild of the game to fix all the issues with the very first version of it.
Hmm.
So
And how
the
long did that
people,
take it?
I think it took a good few months for that. And then The Witcher 2 got enhanced edition, although I don't remember that one all that well. But we did do our talk about the fanboy and fangirlism when it comes to the game industry and to certain developers,
Hmm.
and like the people who are like, what's that sort of like dying on the sword or falling on the sword for Cyberpunk. It's going to be very interesting to see how they feel about that company in the next 5 to 6 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, like, you know, I don't wish any ill will on CD Projekt Red or any other developer, but what they've done is completely uncalled for, and they should definitely get the raw deal that they've given everybody else.
Hmm. Just as we saw with Bethesda and as we saw with Blizzard as well.
Yeah, although they did not get that much of a raw deal, sadly.
They, well, all CD Projekt Red needs to do is announce Diablo 4 and everything will be forgiven, right?
I mean, Cyberpunk too.
You mean Cyberpunk 2078?
Yeah, and
Scott,
and
is
and
your
they also need to announce Witcher 4.
hmm Scott, did your son see the Witcher series on Netflix? I thought that was pretty good. Yeah, I know, Mojo. And the sad part about this, and then I think we could spend an hour talking about CD Projekt Red at this point, but we'll move on to our main topic in the next minute. But what really sucks about this whole thing is that this is as much a self-inflicted wound, I think, as one could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no reason why CD Projekt Red doesn't have the clout to just say, you know what, we're going to delay this a few months.
Oh, they absolutely do have that clout because they've already done that 4 or 5 times now.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't do it enough.
Yep. So, the games, yeah. Yeah, and again, as that famous Shigeru Miyamoto quote, a delayed game can, or I'm going to probably paraphrase it here because I know exact one. A delayed game can become good. A rush game is never good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, word wise to the developers watching, if you have to delay your game, it's better than rushing it out, especially in today's market where people aren't as accepting, I think, of rush games anymore.
Oh, no. I think there's only one exception to rushing your game.
Mm-hmm.
And this is very, case by case basis kind of thing. And, and it's a desperate final move if your studio is about to shut down. That means that unless this game releases and makes money, then we're going out of business next month. And, of course, for solo indies who just do this as a side project or, or they don't have any money, specifically writing on it, that does not apply to you.
Yeah.
That only applies if you actually have a studio, active bills that you have to pay, and you don't have the money to make the overhead. Not you don't have the money to make the game that you want to make. You don't have the money to make the overhead. Your actual bills that already exist and continue to exist kind of thing. Like you can't pay your rent of your building that your commercial building that you're renting kind of thing. Like if something like that is the case, that is kind of the only case. And basically because at that point it doesn't, even if it fails, it doesn't matter because you're going out of business anyway. But if it succeeds, then you could potentially hobble your way back into a standing where you can actually survive for a limited time, and you got to push out, do everything you can to support the heck out of the game.
Yeah. I think essentially at that point you are just essentially trying to fight a fire while trying to start more fires at the same time.
Yeah, essentially.
Let's see. To Scott's comment, it really depends. Are we talking about a game that you're putting it on early access kind of thing, or you're just working on prototypes and you're trying to see which one works, to fully develop?
Well, you did say infrequent updates,
I
so I would assume that he's talking about the other.
I think the problem is, and this is something that I'm working on a video about, talking more about early access these days, is that people expect that if you're putting your game on early access, that your design should be solid. As in the very first version of your early access game, I should be able to enjoy your gameplay. Like if
Mm-hmm.
you release something that is unenjoyable, people aren't going to stick around for hoping that it gets fixed.
Yeah, and also it's going to have to be polished too.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, if you're launching the early access kind of thing, it won't just be a prototype. It'll be like a alpha or beta kind of thing. Preferably like a late alpha or a beta kind of thing.
Your
Where
core gameplay loop should be done. I think
yeah,
it's very important.
where you're adding more content, not necessarily changing what's there, kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing.
David, that is the accessibility controller that Microsoft released, I think, last year or the year before that. Yeah.
Now then, the other part about the prototypes and everything. I mean, a fast prototype, there's a saying, "Fail fast, fail often," kind of thing. To where, and this is more programmer design kind of thing, where programmers will prototype something out real quick, test it out, see if it's fun, repeat over and over until they find something fun, and then once they find something fun, then they start building on it. Although, from a designer's point, if you're a designer, not a programmer kind of thing, then you probably want to, map all this stuff out on a game design document, and that's how you start out, kind of thing, and then you go straight into it. But everybody has their own methods that are best for them, and nobody fits into a box that I just kind of laid out. But it's a generality, and that's what we have to deal with here is generalities.
Yeah. And yeah, like when you're trying to figure out what game you want to make, it's good to build a lot of prototypes. You, like we've said, if somebody can enjoy your game in a prototype stage, with no real art, no real aesthetics done, you kind of have half the battle done at that point. And then it's just refining and iterating on it. You don't want to wait until 2 years in development to realize everybody hates my game.
Yeah, I remember a game like that on your channel. I think it was going by the name Project Triad.
Sounds completely pay to win to me.
Yeah, sounds like a neon continuum of events.
There's some subtle marketing for everyone right there. But we do have to talk more. We can always talk more about early access and stuff in the future, and maybe that will be for another future show to do an update on that. But let's get to our main topic, because then we can spend a good hour, hour and a half on it easily. So this has to do with, let me get the exact name. Just saw it on the list. Where is it? Digital storefront. I just saw it on this page.
Are you talking about the name of it?
Yeah, 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act is the actual name of this. And since Shark is the one who brought up the topic, I'm going to let him take the lead on the introduction here.
So, this is a law that came about in 2018. And it's controlled by the FCC, brother. And it applies to all video games. Now, there were some waivers that were given out that basically either make you immune or give you some kind of immunity to the law. But those all expired. I think it was sometime early this year, around the time Corona really hit us. And if you, I don't think you can get one anymore, but if you already had one, I believe it would still apply in a limited effect to you now. But it would all depend on where your game was at on that date. And basically the summation of this law is basically a law that says that your game needs to be accessible to players, and it goes really deep into even people who cannot see, which you think about people who cannot see playing a video game, and somehow being able to get it to be able to play it, that's a hard one.
Yeah, and it's important to note that for a lot of these talks, as Shark said at the start, we are not lawyers. We do not have any legal backgrounds for this. And another major point is that when you start developing a game, when you officially start developing, it does sometimes affect whether laws will apply to you or not. And again, if you're not sure about any of this, consult an actual legal expert here. Yeah, so getting back to it, like looking at the list, as Shark's saying, this has to do with allowing people with any kind of issue to be able to, well, the law itself, at least broadly, is that any and all UI or information needed to navigate and operate the game has to be as accessible as reasonably possible. And according to the list that the IGGA put out, I did put a link to it in the description. I updated that. It has to do with blind, low vision, no color perception, deafness, manual dexterity, limited reach and strength, prosthesis, I completely butchered that, unable to use time-dependent controls, no speech, or limited cognitive skills. And as a bonus, there are two extra requirements. Avoidance of common epilepsy triggers, which really brings back CD Projekt Red in this talk,
Mm-hmm.
and the ability to pause any moving text.
Yeah. And the thing is it says within reasonable means, meaning that the whole law is subjective. Like here's some invisible rules that you have to follow. Good luck.
And if you remember from earlier in 2020, 20 years ago, when I spoke with Ramin about the loot box law. And the wording in that is also very subjective. And that's what they do with a lot of these laws. They make it very subjective, very broad, so that it becomes harder to really nail down what is and what isn't an example.
Mm-hmm. Which means that you can, you know, be screwed without even knowing that you're doing anything wrong, even though you're trying to follow the rule. And basically, if somebody, that hates video games, like takes over the FCC, he can down pretty much almost every video game known to man that is sold in the U.S. And then guess what? There's basically no games that are actually sold in the U.S. Because it is very subjective. It's a subjective law, so they can apply subjective reasoning to it, and basically, unless you're like one game that completely nails everything in every way, and people who are blind can completely play your game in every way, you are potentially at fault, and they're I read in there that they're able to give you $100,000 fines per day. Up to $1 million, which will be absolutely destroy any indie out there, and will absolutely not affect any of the AAAs at all.
I mean, every indie developer has several $100,000 lying around, right?
Yeah, all of them.
Shark's sitting on a giant treasure chest right now, full of gold doubloons.
Yeah, it's from a sunken pirate ship.
Yeah. So, looking at the list, they put out examples of each one of the kind of acts. One second. Voice is really dying. It's bad allergy season as we're finally getting to the cold here. So, the first one about operable without vision. So, examples would be having a text-to-speech functionality, digital UI navigation. For operable with low vision and limited or no healing, they're looking at stuff like having a large scalable UI, high contrast. And here's the thing, that one in particular has been a major blind spot, even for AAA developers over the last decade. And we really didn't see that become more of a standard or accepted practice until, I would say, maybe a year, maybe 2 years ago, when it comes to AAA, that is. Let's see. Operable with little or no color perception. So no reliance on color alone to communicate. And of course, having a colorblind mode. For people who have hearing issues, allow text input output for voice chat through text to speech and speech to text. Let's see. Operable with limited manual dexterity, digital UI navigation, avoid simultaneous inputs. For operable with limited reach and strength, again, digital UI. For someone with a prosthetic device, avoid using touchscreens or anything that involves having to, touch or interact with the screen like that.
That'll be great for mobile phones.
Oh yes, mobile phones don't need a touch interface.
No, you can make a mobile game without any kind of touchscreen effects in it.
Mm-hmm. Operable without time-dependent controls. Ensure no interaction or input request has any timeout or time limit. I guess they're referring to stuff like the old Telltale where who do you have to choose to survive? You have 10 seconds or something like that. Operable without speech, again, that's allow text input for voice chat through text to speech. Operable with limited cognitive skills, text to speech, speech to text. Non-verbal messages such as emotes, emojis, pings, possible pause text messages. Yeah, so a lot of this stuff, and I think, as Shark was saying at the start, that this law kind of focuses predominantly on text and chatting, or being able to view text while you're playing a game.
Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, it is the FCC, so they're primarily communications-based.
Mm-hmm.
But, UI isn't really communications. I mean, you're trying to communicate things to players, but you're not communicating between person to person kind of thing, but it still applies.
Yeah. And again, like here's a point number 2.6 about prevention of visually induced seizures. Avoid established flash and pattern thresholds for reasonable risk. Testable using the Harding PSE tool, which I believe that's the tool that CD Projekt Red used to explicitly trigger seizures when you play the game.
Yeah.
So here's another $1 million game dev tip for those of you watching this live or recorded. Don't put purposely seizure-inducing lights in your video game.
All right, I'm gonna put purposely in seizure-inducing lights into Neon Continue.
There you go. Make them neon too.
Yeah.
And this is, and I guess this could have been. You said that this law first went into effect in 2018, right?
Yeah, but it really hits in 2020. Ironically,
They probably
that's when the waivers and everything runs out.
Yeah, and what I was able to say is what I think they did is, again, because game development is a multi-year project, they didn't want somebody who was already mid or almost done with the game to say, "Oh, you didn't realize all the stuff we just did. Here's your $100,000 fine." They most likely gave the game industry a 2-year leeway to kind of say, "Okay, finish up all your projects, and now going forward, you need to do this."
Yet at the same time, they didn't inform indies in any reasonable way.
Mm-hmm.
So they only informed the AAA basically. So this is AAA. AAA got the notice, all the info and everything, and but it applies to indies. And of course, they put in like exceptions that based off of your indie studio, how big the studio is, how much money you have, and all this other stuff for exceptions. But exceptions based off of the I used the term a minute ago, the adjustability in the law, basically. Mm-hmm. And that's going to depend on who you talk to, basically. So if somebody really doesn't like you at the FCC, guess what? You're probably screwed.
Mm-hmm. And I'm reading some of these stuff now. So basically how this works is that somebody needs to file a complaint. And once that happens, it basically gets sent to the FCC, and you have a 30-day period in order for that. You basically give the company 30 days to see if they resolve this issue. If that doesn't happen, then the options are either the consumer can close the issue, authorize an extension, or they pay a fee escalate to a complaint, which then, if they do issue an actual complaint to the FCC, then they will investigate that company.
So basically, anybody who wants to start trouble with you can just file a complaint, pay the money, and you're in big trouble, even though you don't have money to address the problem.
Yeah. And here's the paragraph that indie developers need to learn or take note of. However, this does not mean CVA should not be taken seriously. The FCC has a number of means of persuading businesses who choose not to play nicely, including impositions of fines of up to $100,000 per day to a maximum of $1 million per violation.
Per violation. So, if they get you on 5-10 violation, that's $5-10 million. And the thing is looking at that list, there are a lot of video games that no matter how you do them, there's no way to avoid at least having 5 violations.
Mm-hmm.
And
in the Q&A section, it kind of takes the indie scene and puts it over a barrel, I think, is a matter of speaking. So the first question they ask is, my game can't be played by people with disabilities. So if gameplay isn't accessible, why should the communication be accessible? And what they're saying, of course, is there are gamers who are completely blind who can play games like GTA, Titanfall, Call of Duty, WoW, Forza, and people who can play independently playing with assistance from hardware. So their answer is, so while you could theoretically plead unreasonable expense to consider a certain demographic, you would have to be very sure that that demographic you're talking about categorically cannot play. And that's a very hard thing indeed to be certain of.
yeah, so basically, AAA can do it. So you as an indie should do it unless you can prove as an indie with your endless amount of funds, more funds than a AAA, that
That
they can't
literally
play it.
nobody could play this game without
Mm-hmm.
vision.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but we're a small indie. We can't afford this. And their response is, unlike some other accessibility legislation, CVA doesn't have a blanket exception for small companies. If you are providing a communication service, you must register on the FCC site and meet the record-keeping obligations.
Mm-hmm.
Bureaucratic.
And that is, from my understanding, that is only if you have a specific like live chat or something in your game. If you have some way for communications between players, if you have emails. Basically, it only applies if you're a multiplayer game where players can talk to each other. From my understanding on that one, the whole required to register. But my game is exactly that. So looks like I'm going to have to register with the FCC and keep those records, whatever ominous, sounding records they are. And I don't even know what they're wanting from these records. I don't know because they don't tell me anything. They're just saying keeping records, kind of thing. And according to them, is I have to have apparently people with every disability, one person with every disability in the world, to play my game and test it for me. It's like,
And
I have problems finding, 5 people, period, that, have whatever disabilities or no disabilities kind of thing. How am I going to get one of every person with every disability in the world to play test my game when I can't even get regular abled folks to play it?
yeah. And two very important points. That again, this is about selling games. This is not about where you are developing a game from. Very similar what they use, they cite the Belgium anti-loot box law. If you won't release a game with loot boxes, you can release it in the United States, fine. They're not going to complain about it. You release it in Belgium, they're going to, fine you and take that game down. So in this case, if you don't follow the law here, as Shark said at the start, you can't sell your game in the United States, or you risk those lovely little fines.
Yeah, only $100,000 per day.
And it's very important that as I'm reading kind of their exceptions and their kind of legal loophole, this applies to real-time text. So that means any game where there is text being placed and it's being updated in real time. So, people talking to each other, information that's popping up as, you're fighting or shooting or whatever, that applies. If it's
YouTube
messages,
chat.
yep. If it's a message, like they use the Dark Souls example, if it's a message that's left in the world that can be discovered, but it's not being done in real time, that doesn't apply to this law.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, anything else?
Well, this is mainly applying to stuff like color blindness. Color blindness, blind completely, deaf,
Death as well, yep.
Missing limbs. That's the main thing this is talking about.
Yep, and this is focusing specifically on, as we said, about being able to get or understand text that's happening on a game. So, again, multiplayer is a very big point about this because in multiplayer games, you have to communicate with people.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
Mm-hmm.
That just got a whole lot worse.
You're not making a multiplayer game, right?
No, not at all.
It's just solitaire.
Yeah.
Beyond solitaire.
Actually, it's just Pong at the moment.
Oh, there you go. And
Multiplayer
this
Pong.
is, and like we were, I think I want to go back to a point Shark said a few minutes ago that nobody in the independent space was contacted about this. And again, this is part of a greater issue that many people think the video game industry just means Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. That's all video games right there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still very much, we really don't have a quote unquote, was it a union or a government body when it comes to the independent space. So there's no real way for people to get in touch with indie. Because what does indie mean? What's an indie developer, Shark?
Somebody who does not answer to a corporation, somebody who is independent on their own, and they make their own decisions and everything. AKA exactly what CD Projekt Red is not, because they have a corporate board and all this other stuff. They do not, they're not making their own decisions. The board is making the decisions for them. Like releasing the game way too early with tons of game-breaking bugs.
Mm-hmm. And let me see. And again, part of this issue is that so many developers don't know these laws because, again, one, they don't teach you in game design. Make sure to check with the FCC when you're releasing a video game.
Yeah. And they also don't tell you to register with the FCC before you even release your video game.
Mm-hmm.
But technically, pretty much any multiplayer game or any one that has a live chat is supposed to register with the FCC before they even release. And they're supposed to keep documents with them. And the thing is if you don't register and keep documents, you're automatically guilty. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have the most accessible game in the entire universe. If you did not register with the FCC before you released it, and you didn't keep records with the FCC somehow, I don't know how that works, but I gotta figure it out. But if you don't do those two things, you are automatically guilty, meaning that the fines apply to you.
Mm-hmm. And again, part of this is the fact that people can register complaints. So if you get somebody who really doesn't like you and knows that you are skirting that law, it doesn't take a lot for them to put in a call to the FCC about this.
Mm-hmm. And we don't know any troubles on social media or anybody that wants to get games in trouble.
This does make me wonder, with so many developers who really pushed for multiplayer modes, did they consider this? Like Among Us, do you think they have something with the FCC at the moment?
I seriously doubt it.
Yeah.
I would bet you $100,000 a day to a maximum of $1 million for every infraction that they did not.
Yeah. And one of the topics that I do want to talk about on a future show is what to do if you want, what to expect when you're building a multiplayer game in today's setting. And this topic may come back up in that talk.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, if Matthew's talking about the law itself, the FCC doesn't care about video games. They put that like in the Q&A. They care about making sure that people of all groups and all, various motor skills can play these video games or consume content.
Even though they may not actually be able to play the games, they have to be accessible to them, even though they can't physically play them.
Unless you can prove that nobody with that specific condition would ever want to play your game.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, at this point, does that mean that we have to make games that are making fun of disabled people so we can ensure that they don't want to play the game?
Mm-mm.
I mean, are we going to have to go down that route to make our games legally able? That won't lead down a bad path or anything.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
I wouldn't
as
say
for
it's censorship. I would say it's really screwed up laws that really scorched earth that apply subjectability based off of whoever's doing the subjecting.
yeah. And like when I spoke with Rami about the loot box law, if that law went into effect as it was written, the mobile industry would be dead in a day, basically.
Mm-hmm. And
And
and this could very well kill the mobile industry because this says they have to have a way to play the game without touchscreen, and how are you going to play 99.9% of games on mobile without a touchscreen?
mm-hmm. And when we've played a lot of independent games, there are quite a bit of them that would fail basic accessibility law.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big things, so I just on loophole. Well, they said I saw on the question or in the Q&A that you cannot use a third party as a solution. You can't basically pawn off your problems to another company. But
But this applies even if you do not have the chats and stuff in your game,
mm-hmm,
because this applies if to UI elements and stuff like that.
mm-hmm,
And it's if you have the communication stuff, like the direct chats, from a multiplayer game, like my game does. Like if you have a chat system, like YouTube's chat system, or anything along that lines, like email system, any kind of thing where players can send other players, where players can communicate with other players, basically. If you have any of that, you have to register with the FCC before you release and keep records. Now then, if you don't have that, then you don't have to register with the FCC, from my understanding, but you still have to keep records of everything.
mm-hmm. And again, I think one of the things that makes this very tricky is that this is very much one of those cases where you're not in trouble if people don't know who you are. Like, going back to the Among Us example, nobody cared about Among Us in 2018 or 2019 or for most of 2020. We
Mm-hmm.
can say that completely assuredly there. But when you are recognized and people know about you, this is the kind of stuff that can come back to bite you, and why we see, I think, a lot of smaller developers tend to get into trouble when their name gets blown up. If you remember last night, for those of you watching, we played Indivisible, which was from that developer who unfortunately had a lot of controversy that the lead designer kind of fell into due to social media disaster. And it basically led to his entire studio imploding. And again, if you're a small developer, nobody cares, essentially.
So basically, as long as you make games that fail, you don't have to worry about it. But if you make games that succeed, Oh, you have to worry about it very, very hard, which is very bad. It's pushing that now. Even if you get lucky and succeed with a video game, that success could cause you to fail.
Hmm. That message may be a little too political for this talk, David. There, and when it comes to trying to blow up in the game industry, it's part of that issue of the things you don't know getting you into trouble.
Hmm. And I'm sure there's some lawyer that could, sue the FCC for not reasonably telling and informing people. Because I'm pretty sure there's laws about you have to be made aware of laws.
Hmm.
But, they made aware the quote unquote game industry, aka AAAs, but they did not make aware of all the indies. And this law applies to that. But the thing is you don't have to pay a really expensive lawyer to have any chance at that. And good luck with that.
Hmm. And to Ryu's comment, they did say that a game like I can't believe I forgot the name of it, Journey, would not apply because it's all nonverbal gestures and nonverbal communication.
Although the UI stuff would still apply, I believe.
Hmm.
UI,
Yeah,
UX.
it's any real time text. So if your game has tutorial prompts, if you have UI elements that are numbers and words, what most UIs are there, then yes, it would apply to that.
Being
And,
ignorant of the laws is not an excuse, except for when they ghost in a law.
hmm
Yeah. I
and
mean,
like, and
ghosting
what
in a
makes
law shouldn't be legal.
mhm. And that, to Mike's point again, that's where a lot of these issues, and again, why we see a lot of issues come from the independent scene. That not knowing something is bad or a problem doesn't excuse you from making that problem, especially in the consumer eyes.
Hmm. But when it's
And
the laws that, like, I mean, as far as we know, yesterday, the color blue was made illegal. And now both of our streams just, are breaking the law right now. And we don't know about it because nobody told us about it.
mhm.
And if
and
if no effort was given to inform us of a law, there definitely should be something against that.
yeah. And unfortunately, it's part of that issue of the game industry not really being the same as other consumer or other entertainment industries. Again, if you want to contact the film industry, you can send a very harsh word to movie distributors and Hollywood. If you want to get in touch with indie, who do you call?
You call Edmund McMillan, right?
Or Rami Ishmael?
Yeah, they have connection to every indie out there, right?
What about me? I can just hit a button and get every indie developer, right?
Yeah.
But I do want to talk more about the broader points about accessibility as well for our talk. So, anything else specifically about this law that you want to bring up, Shark?
Uh, make sure that if you have any communications between players, you definitely make sure that even if you're making a game, period, that is going to be commercial, make sure you read up on all three of these things. And links are down in the description. And make sure that you file with the FCC if you need to. And make sure that you keep documentation and find out what kind of documentation it is that you need to, keep. Because that's what I got to do now. Because I got to register with the FCC. I got to find out what kind of documentation I got to keep. I got to find out all this other stuff. And, you have to go out there and learn like I do.
Yeah. And two other points from this I want to bring up. That again, or actually three. You cannot, a third party is not going to be your workaround. As in, if you're on Steam or you use Steam or Discord as your chat software, you still need to make sure there is an in-game solution for this. So again, something like Among Us would definitely be flat, because even though they use Discord, they support Discord, that's not the same as having this functionality built into the game itself.
Yep.
The other point, if the platform you are developing on does not have a solution for this, i.e., you're releasing your game on, I don't know, let's say you're releasing your game on GOG and they don't have chat software, I don't know what's in the latest GOG Galaxy, you are not exempt from this. And again, this is all about what is in your video game. And then the third point
and
is,
that applies to engines too. Like if your engine does not support a thing, you're still held liable, not the engine.
Yep. And then the third point is that if your game receives any substantial updates, you still have to remain compliant. So if, let's say, you developed a single player game for the last, I don't know, 2-3 years, and you decide, oh, what the hell, let's put a multiplayer mode in. Well, guess what? Your entire game is now on the hook about this. Or actually, it would be if you had any chat software or any kind of text in your game to begin with.
Yeah, you're pretty much on the hook even on a single player game.
Yep.
But you're less on a hook. Because if as long as you don't have multiplayer with a system where players communicate with each other, as from my understanding, as long as you don't have to have that, you don't have to file with the FCC before you launch your game.
Mm-hmm.
But either way, you're supposed to keep track of these documents and everything, because whether you're single player, multiplayer, it doesn't matter. If there's a complaint lodged against you and the FCC comes after you, then you have to submit the documents and everything, whatever documents it is, because they don't even tell you what kind of documents it is. And if you don't have the documents, you're automatically at fault. Single player, multiplayer, doesn't matter. That applies to every game.
Yeah. And again, before we move on talking more about accessibility in the broader sense, this law, again, like I said, this will kind of cover us because we are not lawyers, that this law specifically applies to any kind of real-time updating the player using text or numbers in any kind of game. So if your game just has, lore entries that are on the ground, it wouldn't apply to that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, as we're saying, as we're getting into the second part of our talk, you do want to consider accessibility in today's market.
Yeah. And another thing, there is one way to completely avoid all of this, but it's not a good way. And it's do not sell your game in America. You have to region lock outside of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And again, we're not lawyers or anything, so we don't even know, some of the things we said may have not even been true. But they were said to the best of our ability kind of thing, and we're trying to inform you as best as possible. Again, we're providing links down below. We're not lawyers, we don't claim to be, and we're just trying to inform you in an entertainment form, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks that I even have to say that kind of crap.
Yep. So, to the broader topic about accessibility in games today, this is one of those aspects that people tend to get into arguments about this on the internet. Some people say that difficulty settings are accessibility, and I would say no to that. And we did have this talk, I think, a few months ago about accessibility and approachability. That accessibility is about elements outside the game that stop somebody from playing it, while approachability are elements inside the game that are stopping somebody from being able to play it. And when we talk about accessibility as a whole, this is something that, as a developer, you do really need to consider this. besides the law we were just talking about, again, there are elements, again, like subtitles, having things for the hearing impaired, avoiding things that can cause repetitive stress injuries, and so on. And I think in today's market, it's just simply good design to think about your game from an accessibility standpoint.
Yeah, it's absolutely good design to do this, to apply, accessibility and stuff. But now it's actually a law, and if you don't do it, you're going to be held for only $100,000 a day, up to $1 million per thing that you didn't include. So if you didn't include anything for blind people, you didn't, include anything for this color blindness, you didn't put anything for this color blindness or this color blindness or this color blindness and this color blindness or any of the other like 30 color blindness. If you didn't do anything for any of those, that's only, 30, $40 million you're on the hook for by not including. So not only is it a good design, it's absolutely necessary to get as many of these things in there as possible so that if the FCC comes knocking at your door, you're better prepared. And make sure you have the documents or whatever they're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Maybe if your China's easier, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you just have to hand your game off to China and let them do it.
Mm-hmm. And you have to be very aware in today's market about just what it means to put out a game that people can enjoy and play. And one of the things that we saw over the last, like, I would say, 20 years have been developers trying to move away from elements that can make your game less enjoyable. For instance, as we said earlier, about having seizure-inducing lights in your game should not be, it should be a very low bar to clear.
Yeah, I wonder if the FCC is going to come after CD Projekt Red now.
That'll be interesting to see. But even things such as getting away from having to rapidly press buttons. And one of the bigger ones, as we said earlier, is not having a UI properly scale or having a large UI option is a very big example of this. For instance, if you ever tried playing a HD game on a non-high def television and the nightmare trying to read that text, because that was certainly fun trying to squint and make out what exactly the game was telling me.
Mm-hmm.
Which, incidentally, that's how I played the first South Park game. It was on my SD TV, so I had no idea what any of the text was in that game. I just had to go by what's happening in the game to figure out what any of it all means.
Yeah. But accessibility has always been good, and we definitely need to go that way, especially now that we can get in huge trouble for not, or even for just not going far enough.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've always done everything I can for that. Although, according to this FCC law, that's probably not enough.
Yeah.
And
And
I
you,
go far. I went farther in my last game than most people have gone. Period.
mm-hmm. And there are people out there who again try to argue that accessibility is, dumbing games down, it's going to hurt the industry. No, that's not how this works.
But this
And
law is going to hurt the industry.
yeah, the point about accessibility is that you are trying to make your game available to as many people as you can, and the more people who can play your game means the more people could spend money on your game.
Mm-hmm. Because what's wrong with having more customers? As long
Mm-hmm.
as you don't have to spend $1 million to get one customer that, isn't even going to come in the first place.
Oh yes.
But now, according to the FCC law, you may get in trouble for not doing that.
Mm-hmm. And this is one of those cases where it's better to do it now or get ahead of the game than being found out and being put in front of the FCC down the line, or any other company or group as well.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I guess I'm trying to think if there's anything else we can talk about in terms of this topic. Anything that comes to your mind?
I mean, nothing in particular. Just, I mean, we've already covered the accessibility stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we already did a previous cast on that. Um, so I mean, we've already covered accessibility as a whole as a topic. We just and we probably covered that before this wall took full effect. I mean, it was definitely in effect, but because that was
Mm-hmm.
probably 2019, and this
Yeah.
wall was done in 2018, but we weren't aware of that wall at the time we made that show,
Again, we were ahead of the game.
or behind at the same time. We were ahead and behind.
They're
We
safely extreme.
we were ahead by telling people before the wall fully kicked in, but we were after the wall had been made, and we were not even aware of the wall. And that's bad when, we're not, informed of the wall. If Josh and I are not informed of the wall, if pretty much everybody I talk to on Tim Rustwick's Discord is not familiar with the wall, including his mods, is Tim even familiar with the wall? I'm assuming that he probably isn't. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, who is aware of this wall besides AAA? And
People who are famous enough that they're getting complaints thrown at them.
yeah,
And
which I heard
I think,
there's been 70 already.
and I think this is the point. And this kind of brings in Mike's comment as well, that smaller developers, like people who are explicitly, and I mean 100% focused on a niche, most likely aren't going to have to care about this. And the reason is that they're not going to basically get big enough to stir the water, in a matter of speaking, which guy works with Shark over here.
Mm-hmm.
But part of what we talk about when it comes to these casts and what I do with Game Wisdom is explicitly for people who want to take that step into having a career in the game industry.
Yeah. And the thing about this is who this wall really, really affects. And it's it's scary, honestly. It's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget everything else I was going to say after that.
But like we've said, when we talk about these kinds of topics, if you're not interested in growing as a developer, if you're trying to just be a hobbyist or you're not even really trying to sell your game, you don't need to consider this stuff. But as we've said many times over, a lot of our topics kind of intersect with each other. Because if you do one thing right, chances are you're going to be doing another thing right. And conversely, if you're doing one thing wrong, it means you're doing another thing
Mm-hmm. Generally, mistakes lead to mistakes, and successes, when leads to successes.
wrong. Mm-hmm. And you have to be aware. I think ultimately, when we talk about accessibility in this topic or in this space, you have to be aware there are people other than yourself who want to play your game. And while, if you are completely, you have no physical or mental issues whatsoever, you may not have to worry about this stuff. But if you're trying to build a mark and build a fan base, it's stuff you need to consider. Even something as quote unquote simple as having translations to other languages, as an example.
Mm-hmm. And
And
to Mike's point about accessibility is a waste of time and money. I don't think it is. I think maybe some of it is, but not all of it. Like I think a lot of things can be implemented very, very cheaply and fastly. But
mhm,
and that's what the law is taking in for exceptions is, based off the size of your studio, the money you have and all that stuff. But it's subjective, uh it's subjective, to how they count that, and it's subjective to how they count everything. It's and that's a real problem with this law is it's all subjective. So they can hold somebody who is a one person studio that
mhm.
making their first game with no money, and they can throw the book at them because they say, yeah, your excuses only account for so much, and it only negates 1% of everything, and we're throwing the book at you, and you get completely screwed, and that's the real problem with this. It's a scorched earth rule that is subjective and is bad. Like accessibility is very good, and we definitely want that. We've been talking about that for a very long time, and there probably needed to be a law around it. But I don't think this is a law we needed.
And again, one of the things about this is that it is far, and like again to this broad topic, it's easier to do this stuff early in your game. One of the issues that we see from a lot of developers is that they consider doing like text to speech or changing their UI 75% done their game's development, where it becomes a lot harder to integrate. And part of the reason why I think the FCC gave this 2-year leeway was for the fact that there were lots of games being in mid-development in 2018. But if you are considering building a game now, as in you're going to start designing a game this year or in 2021, this is the kind of stuff you need to think about very early into your game's development.
Yeah. And it's also things that if you haven't released your game yet, you need to think out because the FCC doesn't care if you heard about the law. Which I could easily make an argument against the FCC. I was talking to, my programmer about this. I was like, could I sue the FCC for having this law not accessible to me and my disabilities? I have anxiety disabilities kind of thing. And this whole law is causing my anxiety to go out the roof. So, they're not being accessible to my disabilities. So can I sue them for that? And the answer to that question is quite possibly. But you'd have to have a good lawyer.
Oh yeah, every indie developer has good lawyers, right? All right, but I think with that, I can't think of anything else I want to really get into regarding accessibility because we talked about this on previous topics.
But again, we were trying to keep our Safely Stream podcast under an hour now. So, and we're already over an hour. So,
normally we go to 2.5 hours, so this is like super early for us.
Yeah, but that's because we moved the Weird Games to its own thing, to the Indie Inquiry.
Which is Thursday, starting around 3:30. We're going to try and shoot for, I think, 3 for next time.
You can sue anybody, Matthew, as long as you have a lawyer. Well, actually, you don't even need a lawyer. As long as you go to court and file documents, you can sue anybody.
And have money for it.
Yeah, I think it's like $100. Good luck getting anywhere, though.
Yeah.
Especially against Google. You don't need a lawyer to fight Google. You need like an army of lawyers to fight Google. An army of lawyers, an army of money, and a whole lot of other stuff.
I'm gonna get so demodded from YouTube about this as well.
Oh yeah, me too. But I'm automatically demodded because I don't have 1,000 subscribers.
Well, get good at getting subscribers. Which that applies to me too.
Yep. You gotta get good with your YouTuber reactions too.
You need YouTuber reactions. You just need different shark pictures of various states of shock.
Well, I have a bunch already. I should have honestly swapped to the facepalm shark for this entire one. Because this one's definitely very facepalmy.
All right. But I think we could probably wrap things up unless anyone has any questions for us regarding accessibility or approachability to discuss.
Or this wall.
I think you need to be kind of established before making devlogs. Like, when you say that, Shark?
I don't think you need to be established. I think you need to have something.
Mm-hmm.
You know, something, you need to have something playable, at least
Mm-hmm.
somewhat playable and fun. You need to, in order, you need to have a good a good prototype
Mm-hmm.
that's been tested and enjoyed
Mm-hmm.
before you start.
Yeah. And I guess bringing this back to like CD Project Red into the AAA market, you really do need to consider what happens when your game blows up. Because just because it means you have more eyes on your game, so it gives you a greater chance of succeeding. But it also shines a light on any negative practices or issues that your game or your company has.
hmm Just like the YouTuber awards, when somebody wins that, it shines a light on them, and any negative thing they have gets shined a light on that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then controversies blow up, and things go downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So don't let yourself go that same route. Be prepared for the light to be shined on you, and
Yep.
remove as many negative aspects as you can from the game, including making your game as accessible as feasibly possible, and
Mm-hmm.
obeying the FCC laws as best as possible.
It's better to cross your T's and dot your I's when nobody's looking, rather than being forced to do that.
hmm
And as we've said, a lot of, especially from the independent scene, has been that struggle of trying to become legitimate. Because when you become legitimate, it means people are now looking at you. And as I said earlier, with like C Project Red and Among Us examples, those games should probably be fined by these laws right now.
Should be fined, not fine, right?
Yeah.
They should be they should be having lots of issues because of these laws. And from what I've heard is, and this is in no way a like thing that saying that you don't have to worry about the FCC or that you shouldn't worry about this law. But from what I heard is that the FCC rarely goes after anybody. But
Mm-hmm.
that said, you know, a lot of times, places like this want to make an example out of somebody. And even if they're only going to do it a few times, they're going to take somebody and they are going to absolutely break them and throw the book at them.
As a warning for everybody else.
Uh huh. And, and that warning for everybody else, they're probably not going to, they may not attack anybody after that point. But, if you don't be careful, kind of thing, you're going to be that example. And the thing is, this is good for your game, period. Accessibility is good for your game, period. Maybe, like the more accessible you can get, the better it is, but you have scope and all those other issues to worry about. So, like, I mean, and there's no actual safe area other than doing everything.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I mean, it's all a risk. And game development, the how you succeed at game development is you definitely apply a very large dose of risk management. So you need to go and do as much risk management as you can if you want to be successful. And this wall different applies to that in several ways. But yeah, I think that's all I have.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I think with that, we will wrap things up for our show this week. For those of you watching this live or recorded, we will be back Thursday around 3 for our next episode of Indian Inquiries. And then Sunday, or next week's topic, should be, I think, our end of the year talk. We'll talk about some of our favorite games, big things we're looking forward to, and just kind of end 2020, I guess, with a very small whimper there.
Yeah, and start 2021 with a other whimper.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I'll be back on Tuesday on my channel for game stream. I'll also be back on Friday for my dev stream, which we have some really cool stuff looking, you know. And Josh got to see one of those things this morning, and it's looking pretty awesome, I think. And yeah, join our Discord, and you get to see those cool things too. And of course, you know, YouTube will get to see a lot of them as well. And it's looking like we're going to be on track to actually have a playable version for our dev chat on January 2nd next year. You know, right after the new year. And we're looking to start the new year off right with a playable version that anybody can play that is on our Discord and comes to our dev chat. You know, so you'll come there and play Neon Continuum in theory. You know, as long as we stay on track, it should happen. But you know, we've gotten off track so many times, so no 100% guarantee there, but it's looking very, very promising at this point. And of course, you know, you can follow me on Twitter at Nexus Games INC1, and all the links to my stuff and Josh's stuff are down below, as well as the links to all the FCC rules and whatnot.
All right, but you can follow me on Twitter at GWBeister, and as Shark said, join our Discords that are in the description if you want to talk game design or get more advice for game development.
Yeah, just don't come to us for law advice.
Yeah, no legal advice here. But we will see you guys later this week and come back for delayed discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. Until next time, everybody, have a great rest of your night.
See ya.